The loudest voice in the room is rarely the one calling the actual shots. True power whispers in the dark. Observe the corporate hierarchy carefully. The narcissist at the table screams, projecting false authority over his silent subordinates, a pathetic display of fragile dominance. He wears the crown of the executive, convinced he controls the entire room. But watch the quiet shadow sitting completely still just to his right side. The quiet employee holds a crimson pen, taking careful notes while lowering their gaze. A flawless mask of absolute submission. This is not obedience, nor is it genuine respect for authority. It is a highly calculated observation phase, gathering data for a psychological takeover. A true predator never strikes immediately. They study the behavioral patterns of their target, searching for the ultimate psychological weakness. The boss truly believes he is the undisputed king of this concrete jungle. Every nod feeds the massive ego, reinforcing an intoxicating delusion of absolute intellectual superiority. The invisible trap is now set. He cannot see the invisible strings being slowly attached to his own limbs. Managing up is a beautiful, utterly terrifying illusion of pure corporate compliance. They surrender the empty corporate spotlight for the absolute certainty of unseen psychological control. A brilliant, silent, hostile takeover. The puppet master smiles in the dark, preparing to make their first calculated move. The greatest vulnerability of a fragile ego is its absolute dependency on constant external validation, an endless hunger for praise. They require absolute confirmation that they are the most intelligent entity in the corporate void. The manipulator understands this pathetic hunger perfectly and begins to carefully prepare the daily ego diet. A feast of strategic compliments. It never begins with overt or clumsy flattery. It starts with a subtle, well-timed nod during a mediocre presentation, validating a painfully obvious business statement, making it feel profound. The narcissist consumes this tiny morsel of approval, feeling a sudden rush of chemical superiority, blind to the hidden agenda. Next comes the strategic mirroring of their physical posture. The human brain instinctively trusts a reflection of itself, establishing a dangerous manufactured rapport, breaking down all natural defenses. The manipulator then deploys the ultimate weapon of the ego diet. They ask for the executive's opinion on a matter they have already perfectly solved, faking a minor intellectual struggle, begging for wisdom. The boss eagerly takes the bait without hesitation, delivering the exact answer the employee planted beforehand, feeling like a savior. He inhales the manufactured respect like pure oxygen. Every compliment is a microdose of psychological poison, slowly paralyzing the executive's critical thinking capabilities, rendering them completely dependent. The diet is working flawlessly. The target is now fully intoxicated by their own inflated importance, completely unaware that the real game has just officially begun. True control is making them believe the trap was their own brilliant idea, an elegant mental hijacking. The manipulator introduces a manufactured crisis, presenting a problem without clear direct resolution, sparking a sudden panic. A panicked narcissist feels threatened, seeking methods to restore their fragile dominance, revealing their hidden desperation. But the architect does not speak. Giving answers would bruise the executive ego, triggering a defensive rejection. Instead, they plant a rhetorical question, leaving breadcrumbs towards a strictly predetermined conclusion, launching the inception drop. The question is framed as genuine curiosity, forcing their human brain to naturally connect, bridging the logical gap. The boss sits in absolute silence, piecing together fragmented data placed before them, hunting for the ultimate answer. The illusion of independent cognitive discovery is vital, stroking the ego to validate their genius, cementing the fatal psychological trap. Suddenly, the executive's eyes widen with false inspiration, a fake epiphany blooming in their mind. The parasitic seed officially takes root. The narcissist slams their hand on the dark table, announcing the strategy the silent employee designed, stealing the brilliant idea entirely. They present the stolen strategy as unparalleled brilliance, blind to the silent architect orchestrating everything, claiming a beautifully manufactured victory. The employee simply lowers their gaze in silence, delivering the final blow of psychological validation, confirming the absolutely gorgeous lie. They offer a perfectly timed whisper of admiration, confirming the executive is a visionary leader, sealing the invisible mental cage entirely. The boss leans back in the massive leather chair, absorbing false validation like a dying man, perfectly manipulated into total compliance. In the shadows, the quiet employee simply smiles, preparing to harvest credit they intentionally surrendered. The trap snaps completely shut. They steal the credit effortlessly, while the invisible architect softly smiles, observing the theft from the deep shadows. To the untrained eye, the executive is a genius, conquering the corporate battlefield with unparalleled vision, projecting an absolute alpha dominance. But true power does not care about public applause. It only cares about absolute guaranteed outcomes, stripping away all unnecessary noise. The manipulator gladly trades the shiny, useless trophy for the heavy keys to the actual kingdom, solidifying their unseen empire. As the narcissist bathes in the warm glow of success, their deep psychological dependency slowly begins to mutate, requiring a heavier dose. They instinctively realize they cannot replicate the sheer brilliance without the quiet whispers of their trusted subordinate. The addiction fully takes hold. And so the architect patiently feeds them once again, delivering perfectly packaged solutions wrapped in pure deference, sustaining the grand illusion. The executive snatches the document with absolute arrogant entitlement, convinced they are merely utilizing a useful tool, totally blind to the puppeteer. But feeding an inflated ego is a highly dangerous transaction, creating a monster that demands constant mental nourishment, expanding into a growing black hole. The manipulator quietly documents every single brilliantly stolen idea, compiling a secret ledger of undeniable intellectual dominance, crafting an insurance policy in ink. Each calculated stroke inside that sleek black notebook represents another piece of the executive's hijacked autonomy, neatly categorized, dated, and filed. Watch closely as the executive opens their confident mouth, only to broadcast the exact phrases the architect meticulously planted, acting as a simple biological speaker. A single pale finger taps gently on the wooden desk, counting down the exact seconds until the puppet repeats the line, executing a flawless mathematical prediction. The psychological cage of stolen glory is fully locked, and the trapped bird inside sings exactly as it is commanded, deeply believing it is completely free. Now that the foundation of absolute trust is built, it is time to deploy the deadly illusion of choice, forcing the final, inescapable submission. Freedom is merely a carefully constructed cage, with exactly 3 doors left open, waiting for the puppet to step inside. The target demands the ultimate power to decide, proving to the room their absolute authority, blinding them to the reality. The first option presented is highly aggressive, mathematically guaranteed to create massive corporate backlash, a spectacular, fiery disaster. The second path is excessively safe and dull, yielding absolutely zero visible short-term profit, insulting the executive's grand ambition. The architect designed these two massive failures to trigger a deep psychological rejection, forcing an immediate emotional pivot. The narcissist scoffs at the terrible suggestions, tossing the defective plans into the darkness, feeling highly intellectually superior. Then remains the singular, meticulously polished third choice, the exact destination the manipulator perfectly desired, glowing with manufactured brilliance. It strokes the ego while solving the crisis, delivering maximum glory with minimum personal effort. An irresistible psychological honey trap. The subordinate fakes a minor hesitation here, acting slightly reluctant to recommend this path, playing hard to get. This tiny manufactured resistance triggers the executive, causing them to violently demand the third option, seizing it like prey. They sign the decree with absolute blind confidence, completely unaware they just walked into prison, locking the door themselves. The illusion of choice is the ultimate weapon, masking a ruthless dictatorship as democratic collaboration, leaving absolutely no fingerprints. When a rat runs through a complex maze, it truly believes it navigated the paths, ignoring the cold glass walls. The boss stands tall and deeply satisfied, having proudly navigated a carefully rigged game, declaring a fraudulent checkmate. But a far more devious vulnerability remains unexploited, a hidden trigger designed to weaponize sympathy, waiting in the dark. A calculated display of highly artificial weakness perfectly triggers the intense savior complex of a raging narcissist, cementing absolute psychological dependency. The manipulator suddenly introduces a deliberately manufactured obstacle, aggressively faking extreme confusion over a trivial administrative detail, requesting urgent executive assistance. The executive spots this incredibly rare moment of vulnerability, feeling a sudden massive surge of paternalistic corporate dominance, eagerly leaping to the rescue. They offer arrogant guidance on a completely meaningless issue, deeply believing they are the benevolent intellectual savior of the room, totally blind to the act. The boss aggressively corrects the tiny manufactured mistake, forcefully inhaling the sweet scent of their own fabricated brilliance, puffing their chest proudly. The subordinate exhales a long breath of pure artificial relief, openly praising the executive for their incredibly timely intervention, feeding the starving ego beast. It is the ultimate paradox of absolute dark psychological control, willingly submitting fully in order to absolutely dominate the entire room. A flawless, invisible inversion. A heavy hand lands patronizingly on the employee's quiet shoulder, transferring false warmth while the trap securely continues to tighten. An utterly chilling corporate embrace. Underneath the submissive mask, the true architect quietly smiles, knowing the executive is now permanently chemically addicted to saving them. Trapped in a pathetic behavioral loop, they have successfully trained the arrogant alpha of the pack, rewarding the beast with the grand illusion of absolute superiority, maintaining flawless covert dominance. The executive walks away feeling incredibly powerful and necessary, entirely unaware that their emotional responses are fully automated, completely hacked by a silent engineer. The corrected document is smoothly tossed into the deep darkness, having served its singular purpose as a cheap emotional decoy, a highly disposable psychological prop. Every single act of false salvation binds them even closer, invisibly weaving an inescapable web of mutual toxic dependency, solidifying the incredibly dark alliance. The room is now perfectly permanently divided into two distinct realities. The loud, oblivious actor purely enjoying the spotlight, and the silent director, managing the entire stage. The final complex pieces of the grand illusion are firmly set, and the incredibly intricate dance of the invisible crimson strings is about to flawlessly begin. The invisible strings are now completely secure, wrapping around the executive's mind tightly, rendering them a flawless, living marionette. Watch the hollow executive sitting in meetings, violently defending strategies they never actually designed. Speaking with total manufactured conviction, the architect sits perfectly silently nearby, effortlessly sliding notes across the dark wood, dictating the exact flow of power. The boss reads the crimson text verbatim, deeply believing the words are their own, entirely disconnected from cognitive reality. They have been reduced to a rubber stamp, enthusiastically approving decisions they absolutely cannot comprehend, signing away their own leadership. Every single stroke of the heavy pen mathematically transfers more invisible operational control straight into the subordinate's waiting hands. The entire corporate ecosystem smoothly aligns itself, bowing down to the quiet, neat employee, completely bypassing the official hierarchy. The narcissist remains locked in their office, perfectly isolated within a false echo chamber, blind to the shifting authority. The shiny plastic crown remains highly visible, but the heavy iron throne sits quietly, exactly where the architect rests. Emails and directives flow through the shadows, continually intercepted and rewritten by the subordinate, creating a flawless informational blockade. The puppet only sees the curated numbers, viewing a beautiful dashboard of manufactured success, hiding the terrifying structural reality. The dark machine turns with terrifying precision, silently crushing any genuine independent executive thought, establishing an absolute silent dictatorship. When the artificial victories are finally announced, the executive loudly demands the entire spotlight, and the architect gracefully steps back. They willingly disappear into the dark void, thoroughly satisfied with absolute raw operational control, letting the invisible strings hum softly. But flawless systems require constant meticulous maintenance, and the massive weight of the ego is finally beginning to severely crack. Feed a hungry beast long enough, and it completely forgets how to scavenge, becoming wildly unpredictable. The executive now operates on pure delusion, fully believing their own brilliantly fabricated myth, demanding absolute blind obedience. Intoxicated by a long streak of victories, the narcissist begins making massive, reckless gambles, ignoring all logical protocols. They sign dangerous contracts without any consultation, deeply convinced of their own absolute invincibility, rushing toward the cliff. The engineered ego has grown too massive, breaking out of the carefully constructed cage, threatening the entire operation. When the quiet architect subtly offers guidance, the executive aggressively rejects the valid warning, asserting fake alpha dominance. The monster they created now bites back, viciously attacking the very hand that feeds, demanding total, uninterrupted worship. It is a terrifying shift in dynamics as the puppet wildly pulls its strings, ripping the delicate fabric. The manipulator sits in the dark boardroom, silently watching the impending catastrophic corporate disaster, calculating the severe damage. A sharp red warning flashes on screen, indicating a massive failure is rapidly approaching, and nobody can stop it. The boss laughs arrogantly at the danger, completely blind to the fast-approaching abyss, drunk on false power. They have stolen so much unearned glory that they actually believe they are gods, defying basic business gravity. The invisible steering wheel is completely shattered, leaving the speeding vehicle with no driver, heading straight for impact. For the first time in the game, a cold drop of real human sweat rolls down the architect's face. The beautifully designed machine is violently shaking, preparing to detonate and destroy the room, trapping the silent creator. The architect builds a flawless and perfect empire, only to become its absolute permanent prisoner, locked entirely inside. The psychological pressure of maintaining the perfect facade is slowly but surely crushing their sanity, creating deep fractures. The heavy toll of extreme constant vigilance requires tracking every unpredictable variable highly precisely, draining their mental energy. They must endure the endless, arrogant screaming, pretending to absolutely worship a complete fool, suppressing their own disgust. The manipulator must constantly fix the reckless mistakes, cleaning up the catastrophic and daily messes, remaining completely unseen. Living a permanent lie completely destroys identity, blurring the lines between the master and the obedient corporate slave. A single slip of the carefully constructed mask could instantly destroy the entire dark operation, exposing the cold truth. The delicate balance of power is tipping. The parasite is being completely overwhelmed by the massive host body. They cannot sleep or afford to ever rest, forced to vigilantly guard the dark cage, trapping the hungry beast. The executive's demands become increasingly insane and erratic, demanding impossible results from their silent, invisible savior, stretching resources entirely thin. The brilliant psychological diet they so carefully invented has mutated into an extremely toxic addiction, poisoning the creator slowly. Every string they originally attached to the puppet has secretly wrapped backward around their own throat, suffocating their career. There is absolutely no exit strategy cleanly planned. The architect is now fully chained down, bound to the puppet. The brilliantly designed psychological control grid is failing, and the inevitable catastrophic collapse is approaching fast, leaving nowhere to hide. When the immense pressure finally reaches critical mass, the beautiful, delicate system violently shatters completely, entirely beyond all repair. When the manufactured reality finally breaks apart, the terrifying true cost is violently revealed. A complete psychological devastation. The arrogant executive looks desperately for answers, but the feeding tube is completely empty, leaving them utterly defenseless. They turn to the quiet, obedient shadow, begging for another brilliant, fabricated corporate miracle. But nothing ever comes. The invisible architect is completely paralyzed now, drowning in the very ink they spilled, unable to stop anything. A perfectly rigged game of falling dominoes brutally accelerates until the entire room collapses, crushing both the players. The giant inflated ego plummets to earth, screaming as the massive plastic crown shatters, exposing the pathetic truth. And the silent master is dragged down, permanently tethered by their own crimson strings, falling into the abyss. Managing up is incredibly deeply seductive poison, promising absolute control over the corporate throne, delivering a shared grave. You cannot tame a wild, ravenous monster by feeding it pieces of your soul. It will consume everything. The corporate void silently swallows them both, leaving only the echoing whispers of manipulation, fading into dark history. But the dark cycle never truly ends. As a new arrogant king takes power, and another shadow waits. Another quiet subordinate neatly prepares their desk, laying down a brand new crimson pen, ready to feed egos. The boardroom table remains a dangerous battlefield, where the quietest players weave the traps, smiling in the dark. The puppet and the master lie broken, tangled forever in the exact same web, indistinguishable from each other. True power is never a stolen crown. It is the profound ability to walk away before the strings snap.